Okay, in this video, I would like to tell you a little bit about the Edgeworth box. And so far, we've been talking about utility functions and how to solve for utility functions. In the Edgeworth box, we want to introduce an economy. We want to introduce a market with more than one participant. So far, we've looked at what would one participant do. And now we would like to derive effectively or see this Edgeworth box. Now, imagine that we have an economy where there's only two goods. So let's assume, which is what we're going to do, two goods. Can uncreatively call them X and Y, and we can count the squares. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And we can say that there's 14 goods of X in this economy, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9 goods of Y. That's the endowment of the whole economy. Okay, so if you are one participant, let's say here it's Revi. Okay, Revi is one participant in this economy. And for example, if I put a point in this, you might see that as an allocation of resources. So for example, here, I'm getting 4 units of X and 2 units of Y. So my allocation is 4 and 2. What if I have another point? What if I'm here? Well, if I'm here, I'm at the edge of this economy. So I'm actually getting everything in this economy. I'm getting all the 14 X's and I'm getting all the 14 Y's. Okay. What about the other members in this economy? Well, if I'm in the red spot, the other members of this economy are getting the leftovers. So are getting the difference between the 14 and the 4, so they're getting the 10, and they're getting the difference between the 9 and the 2, so they're getting the 7. Okay. How that is distributed between the other members of this economy, I don't know. And generally economies will have more than two individuals. But we are also going to make a simplifying assumption and assume two individuals. So we're going to assume that the whole economy is comprised of just these two individuals. Once that's the case, then the Edgeworth box emerges because that single point of mine also tells you precisely the allocation of resources of the other individual. Okay, so in this particular case, I could draw a different color for the other individual, let's say orange. Okay? Let's say here could be Ben. Okay, and I can make another X's, which is upside down, but it's trying to capture the leftover in the economy when you see it from my perspective, which is what you're used to seeing. You're very used to seeing this graph. You're not so used to seeing this box. But effectively, this is, right? This is yet another version that you are familiar with, but it's the leftovers. Okay, so there's some lessons here. Every point on the Edgeworth box, say this point A, will effectively divide the resources in this two good economy, two individual economy between the two. Okay, so at point A, for example, this is the units of X. This is Ben's X units, right? And this would be Revi's X units. Of course, you could have equivalently seen that by focusing on this part here. Okay. The only difference is that Ben's resources are kind of, this is the origin. So as I go in this direction, Ben gets more. And if I go in this direction, Revi gets more. But the thing to realize is that in the Edgeworth box, each point is giving you how the resources are being allocated in the economy. And you could also visualize it as, for example, at point A, I could say that this is sort of like my share of the economy. And this is Ben's share of the economy. Now, of course, the areas there don't make a lot of sense. That's why we need to focus more on the units that they're getting. So at that point over there, right, Ben is getting this bit of Y. Okay, so this is the Y that Ben is getting. Ben's Y units. Okay, so in this first video, which will follow the whole idea of exchange economies, the first lesson is about the Edgeworth box. Let's summarize. An Edgeworth box only works when we have two goods, X and Y, and two individuals, Revi and Ben. But the moment that we have those two individuals, every single point in this will represent an allocation of resources. Now, you might think, why don't I have a point for Revi and a point for Ben? Well, if you did that, you would imply that the thing in between are not being claimed by anyone, which is something that we do not assume, right? So we assume that there is no wastes, if you like, in this economy, right? So all the X's and Y's are being distributed between Ben and Revy. So even though there's two individuals, a single point gives me the allocation of both individuals. And if you like, this is part of the insight or the usefulness of the Edgeworth box. I hope you find this useful. I'll see you on the next video.